Good evening, everyone, and good morning to Dr. Aslandogan.
Good evening.
Today, we have the honor and the privilege of having Dr. Alp Aslandogan, who is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Shared Values, a nonprofit organization that promotes bringing together citizens of diverse backgrounds, values of humanity. Local partners of AfSV focus on interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Prior to his current position, Dr. Aslandogan served as the board member of the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue in Houston, Texas. Dr. Aslandogan is the co-editor of Muslim Citizens of Globalized World, Contributions of the Gulen Movement, published by the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue, and the co-author of The Messenger, Prophet Muhammad and His Life of Compassion, published by Blue Dome. He published columns in CNN, Huffington Post, FoxNews.com, and serves as a contributing editor for the Fountain magazine and on the board of scholars and practitioners of the Journal of Interreligious Dialogue. He holds a PhD in computer science. You're welcome, Dr. Aslandogan.
Thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to address this group of young advocates, activists, beautiful people.
Yeah, thank you for joining us again. So we have up to 3 hours. And you can decide on how long you want to continue this session. Within that, your presentation may continue for 1 hour or 1 and a half hour, and then we can move on to discussion. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening again to everybody. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart, dialogue and civic engagement, and especially the scientific basis for these. As you are here in this program, I assume that you all believe in the value of dialogue and civic engagement, but how do we know that they work? So what I want to do is I want to start with a definition of both concepts. Let me share my screen. So I want to start with simple definitions of these two concepts. How do they differ? And then look into 2 kinds of scientific evidence that were provided, that were obtained, showing that dialogue and civic engagement actually works. They actually help with the peace in our societies. Just as a background, my organization, the Alliance for Shared Values, is a kind of a loose umbrella organization for Hizmet movement affiliated local organizations in the United States. We have 6 partners from the United States and 1 partner from Canada. And their overall goal is to bring together Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and others around shared values of humanity and around meaningful social responsibility projects. So let me start with dialogue and then switch to civic engagement. And the views that I'm sharing here are reflecting the perspective of the Hizmet movement, but I think they are shared by many other movements and many other people who believe in these concepts. So in our perspective, dialogue is a meaningful exchange, interaction, and it is among people of different ethnic, social, cultural, religious, political, ideological backgrounds. It may involve conversations and activities, and ideally, nobody should be trying to impose their ideas and beliefs or values upon others. It is about learning about others, learning to respect and understand others. It is not about converting others. And we expect it to happen in an atmosphere of equality, tolerance, honesty, openness, sincerity, courtesy. This definition, by implication, means that it is not about converting anybody. It is not about compromising from your beliefs. It is not about unification of religions, and it is not a debate. While you may engage in any of these activities, they may be legal and ethical if done the right way. This is not how we approach dialogue. We don't see dialogue being really fruitful when the intention is any of these. And then there are several examples of activity. Now, let's contrast this with civic engagement. In interfaith, intercultural dialogue, you are in the platform, you are in the environment as a representative of your religion or ethnicity or background. Whereas civic engagement is about the engagement of citizens, neighbors, residents of a locality. So that is the main first distinction. You are engaging as citizens. You are not engaging as Muslims, Hindus, or Jews and Christians. Here I include three definitions. The first one is defining civic engagement as a process of connecting individuals in a society with one another to share common interests and work for the common good. So citizens of a society come together, they connect for common interest and common good. In the second definition from Encyclopedia Britannica, it's a broad set of practices and attitudes of involvement in social and political life that converge to increase the health of a democratic society. And finally, from American, I believe, Psychological Association, individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. So as you see in all these definitions, public good, the betterment of the society, democracy and peace are at the forefront. Now there is an interesting study, a very valuable study that actually showed on a scientific basis that interfaith civic engagement works. That was done in India. I know that many of our viewers are from India, so you may be aware of this study. So if it is a repetition, please excuse that. But it is very valuable. It was done by a professor of an American university, Dr. Ashutosh Varshney. And he looked into two kinds of civic engagement. The first kind he calls associational or institutional. And the second kind he calls everyday engagements. So the first kind of engagement is done by citizens of different backgrounds under an umbrella of an institution. So it could be a business association, it could be a professional organization, reading club, like a hobby club, film club, sports club. It could be the NGOs, it could be trade unions, it could be even political parties. And I am sure you are familiar in your environment of different kinds of organizations like this. So, for instance, for India, Muslims and Hindus coming together in a business association or a professional association would be an example. For America, Christians, Protestants, Catholics, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims coming together under the umbrella of a business or professional association or a hobby club would be an example. These are institutional examples of civic engagement. And the everyday engagement, he gives examples of families visiting each other, families eating together, families jointly participating in festivals. Again, in America, this would be, an example would be the celebration of Thanksgiving, for instance, which is not a religious holiday, by Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others. Allowing families, allowing their children to play together, playing sports together. And again, you can imagine other kinds of engagement from your community. So the distinction between the two kinds of civic engagement is that One is done under an umbrella of an organization, institution. The other one is just done on a casual daily basis. Now, one interesting observation, very valuable observation by Dr. Vashni from Brown University is that in every society, there are politicians who want to take advantage of the polarization in the society. Religious differences, ethnic differences, class differences, economic class differences, any kind of background differences. These are very easy to use for politicians to gather their base together, to gather support for their political agenda, and to declare another side as an enemy. So in every society, unfortunately, politicians sometimes resort to hate mongering, sometimes resort to enemy building, increasing the tensions among these groups. So what Ashutosh Vashni observed was that institutional civic engagement is very resilient against politicians' polarization efforts, or by anybody for that matter. Unfortunately, sometimes some religious leaders may also engage in polarization. So Ashutosh Vashni observed that when people are engaged through institutions under an umbrella organization, this kind of engagement is more resilient against polarization. So a politician might say, this group A is, they are bad people. We don't want them here. They should be out of here. Or group B is the bad people. When they do this, if group A and B are engaged under an institution, they are more likely to say, no, you're not correct. I know people from group B. They are nice people. They are good people like us. They want the same things from life. So you're trying to further divide us. So people are more resilient against politicians who want to divide the society more. And this is, of course, not a statement against all politicians. All politicians don't do that, but unfortunately, some do. Some religious leaders do. Even some civic leaders, unfortunately, may further polarize people, although they are supposed to be doing the opposite. So Dr. Vashni's findings are documented in his books. One of them I included here, Ethnic Conflict and Civic Life, Hindus and Muslims in India, and you can obtain this book from anywhere you obtain books. So one striking example that he gives in his articles and the book is he listed some cities in India where there were deaths in violent conflicts. And he looks at individual cities, how there was conflict or there was not much conflict, how there were deaths or there were no deaths in these cities. And he looked at the difference between among these cities in terms of engagement. And what he observed was that in the cities where there is a lot of engagement, there are no violent conflicts, and you don't see these cities in this list. Whereas in the cities where there is less engagement, more kind of partition, there is more violence. So these cities that you see here are the cities where there's a lot of violence. And then as you go down, as the civic engagement increases, there are other cities where there are no deaths because of violent conflicts. So one of the cities that is not here, where there is a lot of engagement, is Calicut, for instance. In the city of Calicut, not Calcutta, Calcutta is here. In the city of Calicut, in his examination, there was a lot of engagement, and therefore there was not much violence. So this is one example that I want to cite among three examples or three sources as the scientific basis that dialogue and civic engagement actually work. They work to increase the peace. They work to decrease the violence among different groups of the society. Now, the second example, I want to talk about a survey in America. Let me switch to that. So some years ago, in America, a Christian businessman established a foundation. This foundation is named One Nation Foundation, and its purpose was to improve the image of Islam in America. Now, the reason this gentleman, George Russell, the bottom picture, the reason George Russell started this foundation was that after 9/11, he observed that in America, the image of Islam is very negative, and people begin to see Muslims as enemies. And he feared that, like in Europe, there were religious wars for a century. He feared that there could be religious wars in America and around the world among Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others for religious differences. And he thought that in order to contribute to preventing such a war, that he should do something. So he put millions of dollars to establish this foundation, One Nation Foundation, and he hired Mr. Henry Izumizaki as its director. So this foundation for 4 years worked in trying to improve the image of Islam in America. So they trained TV anchors, they provided resource materials for Hollywood scriptwriters. They trained imams for better communications. They helped produce documentaries depicting Islam in a positive way. So they did this for 4 years. But after 4 years, they looked at the results of a survey that was done by Pew Research. And also there were similar research by Gallup organization. These are two of the leading polling organizations in the United States. And the results of these polls were very depressing for them. So the results of the polls were about how Americans view different religions. When Americans were asked how warm, how sympathetically do you view a religion, and how cold or distant do you see a religion? So give these religions a score of 0 to 100. The warmer that you feel about a religion, more positive, give a higher score. And the colder or less positive, more negative you feel about a religion, give it a lower score. So the overall result in America was that Judaism got the top score with 63, Catholic Christianity 62, Evangelical Christianity 61, Buddhism 53, Hindus 50, Mormons 48, atheists 41, and Muslims 40. So overall in America, at the time of this poll, Islam had the worst image among the religions, the world religions. But also notice that no religion got like 80 or 90. So there are people who are against essentially every religion, all the religions. So this was a depressing result for George Russell and Henry Izumizaki. One finer detail about this result is that when the result was divided between Republicans and Democrats, the results were a little bit different. Among Republicans, Evangelical Christianity has the highest score at 71, Judaism 67, Catholics 66, Mormons 52, and then Buddhists 49, Hindus 47, atheists 34, Muslims 33. Among Democrats, Judaism 62, Catholics 61. The bottom religion for Democrats was not Islam, it was Mormonism, 44, atheism 46, Muslims at 47. So for Democrats, Islam scored a little bit better compared to among the Republicans. So this result between the two major political groups in the United States was also different. So still very depressing. Now, what was the highlight of this study was that people were also asked, do you know anybody from that religion? Now, based on whether they knew somebody from that religion, the result of the study was very different, because if they knew somebody from that religion, their score for that religion was somewhere between 10 to 15 points higher. If you compare these values here, for Judaism, overall score is 63. But if somebody knows somebody from Judaism, a Jew, then the score is 69. If they don't know, 55. When we look at Islam, overall score 40. If they knew somebody from Islam, if they knew a Muslim, the score is 49, like almost 10 points higher. If they didn't know somebody, 35 points. For Hinduism, 50 points in general. If they knew somebody, 63. If they didn't know somebody, 47. Even for Mormons, which for Democrats was the least favorite, overall score is 48. If they knew somebody, 53. If they didn't know somebody, 44. So this is the second piece of scientific evidence showing that engagement of any sort works. If a person knows somebody else from another religion, ethnicity, their image of that religion is much better. Now, why, you might ask, why is this? Before I go into my third scientific basis for why civic engagement and dialogue works. So why is this result? And based on the other evidence, the most likely reason is that we learn about a religion or ethnicity or a group through different means. If we learn about this religion or ethnicity or nationality or race or class group through direct experience, our experience is more likely to be positive because we are more likely to see this other person as a human first. Whereas if you learn about this other group through media images or through a friend, just hearsay, gossip, then that image is more likely to be negative. Because many people don't actually meet and engage with somebody from another religion or ethnicity in many countries, in many societies, their default image of that person or group is negative. So meeting a person of that religion makes a big difference, anywhere between 10 to 15 point difference. There was a similar study done about neighbors in America. And Dr. Ingrid Mattson, the former chairman of the American Islamic Society of North America, talks about this. So in this study, Americans were asked, which religion do you like the best as a neighbor? A person from what religion would you like as a neighbor and you don't like? And again, people did not want a Muslim as a neighbor, but for those people who did have a Muslim neighbor, their score of Islam was highest. So by default, they don't want a Muslim neighbor, but once they become a neighbor with a Muslim, and their image of Islam is substantially improved. So again, another example, another evidence for the fact that civic engagement works. Now I want to go into the third category of evidence, and I think this is also very valuable, and it is a different kind of evidence. So this evidence that I want to share is from an article which is based on neurological research. And the article is entitled "Your Racist Brain, the Neuroscience of Conditioned Racism," authored by Manny Bosman. So I highly recommend that you obtain the article and have a look at it yourself. Besat, I'm assuming everything is going okay. You can hear me and see the presentation?
Yes, no problem.
Right. So in this study, they did not do polls or they did not ask people. They actually did imaging of the brain. So they did MRI imaging of the brain and functional MRI imaging of the brain. And they made these observations. So observation number one, our brains are constantly gauging other people as to whether they are friends or foes. So whenever we meet somebody or when we see the image of somebody, our brain is automatically deciding, is that a friend or foe? So the second observation is that anyone perceived to be different from friends or in-group, that is the group that we feel like we belong to, it triggers a threat response. So it triggers our amygdala, the inner side of our brain, and it puts us into fight or flight mode. Automatically, when we see somebody whom we see as different, their color of skin is different, their look is different, their dress is different, the way they speak is different, by default, it puts us into a threat response, unless we know people from that group, we have engaged with them before, and unless we have some commonality that we can observe. And I'm going to give an example of this shortly. Another observation is that although every person has empathy toward other humans, we have less empathy for people whom we see as others. Okay. So every human is biologically endowed with a kind of a center in their brain for empathy. Okay. This group of neurons in the brain are called mirror neurons. And when we observe other humans, we empathize with them. And if they are happy, we also become happy. If they are sad, we also become sad. So this is in everybody. But it doesn't work at the same level in everybody, toward everybody. So when we observe somebody whom we see as in our group somehow, it is, they are in our nation, they are in our religion or ethnicity or neighborhood or something, they are dressed like us, they are aged like us, somehow, some kind of an in-group perception. If that is the case, then we have more empathy toward that group, toward that person. And the reverse is also true. When we don't see them as our in-group, we have less empathy for them, which means that we can tolerate more pain of their suffering. We can tolerate more of their suffering, of their pain. And experiments were done for this. People were allowed to control a kind of pain that another person suffers. And it was observed that when the other person is unlike them, they allow the other person to suffer more pain. All right. The fourth observation is that our brains are predisposed to fear those who are different. So this is a kind of a default protection mechanism that is in every human, that we are likely to fear people whom we see as different. Number 5, some of this fear conditioning is not by default, it is actually learned. So some of the fear conditioning is actually, it comes with the birth. Even in babies, they observe this. Even in babies, they have this response towards certain humans. But some of it is learned. It doesn't come as a baby with us. It is learned through schooling. It is learned through culture. It is learned through viewing media, news media, and commentary. So these are all kind of cautionary or maybe disappointing findings, but they are scientific findings. Now, what is inspiring? What is inspiring is that number 6, rewiring is possible. So whatever conditioning we have in our brain that came naturally for physical features, or that came socially through, as we go through in our culture, in our life, as we observe news media, whatever wiring is done in our brain, rewiring is possible, these experts observed. And then they made another observation that reframing to disassociate with fear element is necessary. So when we fear something or somebody, we produce a frame in our body, in our mind, about that person or group or threat. Okay. So people who are dressed like this are a threat to me. People who look like this or in this skin color are a threat to me. So this frame needs to be changed. And most importantly, the most important finding for us is that personal interaction with people from the other group is a very powerful rewiring experience. So whatever condition that we have built in our life up to that point, either it came by default, for instance, an Asian person seeing a Western person as different and vice versa, or a white person seeing a black person as different. This is kind of biological. And then there is the more social learning that happened later on. Whatever wiring we came up to this point in our lives, when we begin to interact with another person, the researchers were able to observe through fMRI imaging that their brains are rewiring. Their perception of the other is changing. So this is the third kind of evidence that shows that dialogue and civic engagement actually works. Scientifically, they change people's perception of others, and they help the society become more peaceful. Of course, sometimes a fear may be rational. There might be actual data and actual experience, or a set of experiences that shows that a fear is rational. But in most cases, the fear is not rational. When you see somebody whom you think is a threat, that person most likely have not done anything to harm you up to that point. You just see that person as a representative, as a member of a class whom you think is threatful to you. So in most cases, our threat perceptions in a modern society are not rational. So personal engagement, civic engagement, dialogue actually helps us rewire our brains to remove those false perceptions of threat, and then begin to see others as fellow humans. So here I want to give an example from my personal experience about this in-group, outer-group perception, because it might be a little bit depressing. You might think, okay, I am, Asian, and he is, somebody else is Western or African. I can't change that. That means we are always in the outer group, right? So, or you can think that, I'm dressed in a certain way, especially for the ladies in certain cultures. I'm dressed in this way, so somebody seeing me automatically will identify me as Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or something, or Jew, and therefore they will always see me as the outer group, or the other group. There's no way I can change that. So it might be depressing, but that's not the situation. So let me give you this example. And the idea is that the in-group and other group or out-group perception is very flexible, and it is multidimensional. It is not one-dimensional. It is not simply Muslim versus Hindu, or Christian versus Jew, or Asian versus European, or white versus. It is not just that. It is actually multidimensional, and it is also flexible. So this example from my life in Texas, I lived in Texas for several years, 5-6 years in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then another 6 years in the Houston area. And one day, I was speaking at an interfaith event in the town of College Station in Texas, which is the hometown of Texas A&M University. So this is one of the two big universities in Texas. If you are interested in American universities, you probably know them. The other one in Texas being University of Texas in Austin. So these two universities, as you can imagine, they are bitter rivals. They compete in sports competitions, American football and others. And they have their mascots, they have their symbols, and they have their colors. The color for Texas A&M University is burgundy, and the color for University of Texas is orange. So I'm speaking in College Station, and in Texas, there is this kind of tradition. It's a humorous tradition. People who moved to Texas later in their lives, they were not born in Texas. If they are speaking to a Texan audience, sometimes they say, I was not born in Texas, but I came to Texas as soon as I could. So when Texans hear this, they say, oh, great. So you're now a Texan, and there is a lot of sympathy building in the room when people say that. there is a kind of a state pride among the Texans going back to, over a century, when Texas was an independent state for a while. So Texans are very proud of their state. So when I was speaking in College Station, the home of the A&M University with the color burgundy. So I began to address the audience, mostly Texans. I said, from the way I speak, you can tell that I was not born in Texas. I'm sure I cannot say that I came to Texas as soon as I could. I came to Texas for my job, which was in my 30s. But I have my car outside and know that its color is burgundy. And immediately in the room there was clapping, oh yay, and immediately they began to see me as somebody who is on board, who is in the in-group. So immediately they begin to think in the rivalry between University of Texas and Texas A&M University, I am on their side. So in a sense, because of the color of my car, I became a member of their in-group. So although I am originally from Turkey, I am Muslim for my religion, and I speak with an accent. It doesn't matter now, because in terms of the rivalry between University of Texas and Texas A&M University, I am on their side, right? And if you think about all the engagements in our lives, you can see that there are so many opportunities. When you meet with somebody, up to that point, that person was just a label. He is an American or British or Indian or Pakistani or Kenyan or Tanzanian. Up to that point, that person is, white or black or Asian or Latino, a label. Up to that point, a person is, working class, businessman. Up to that point, it could be even, finer detail distinctions. That person could be Northern Indian, Southern Indian, Western Indian, Eastern Indian. In America, it could be Southerner, New Yorker, Californian, coastal, even within California, there's the coastal California, there is the Central California. So until two persons meet, the other person is simply a label. But when two persons meet, something magical is happening. What is magical is that two persons look at each other through their eyes. And if you have heard about Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi before, he has a beautiful description of this encounter. He says, when two persons come together and look at each other, it is two souls that are looking at each other through the window of the eye. Let me repeat that. When two persons come together and look at each other, it is two souls that look at each other through the window of the eye. Now, just think about it. This is a very profound saying. When two persons actually come together and look at each other, the human soul, the two human souls, they recognize each other. They recognize that they come from the same source. But they are in a different body, they are in a different life experience. So in a sense, one soul asks the other soul, oh, my fellow soul, which is from the same source, how is your experience in that Indian body? How is your experience in that Turkish body? How is your experience in that white or black body? How is your experience in that male or female body? But we are two human souls. So there is something magical going on in human engagement. So my point was that, when we talk about in-group, out-group perception, we should not be stuck in thinking that this is solid, this is, cannot be changed. No, that's not the case. Yes, we may be different, objectively different in certain level, nationality, ethnicity, religion, but we also have so many things in common. Our hobbies may be very, very similar. What we want for our kids, for our family, may be very similar. Okay, the music we listen to may be very similar. the colors that we wear or our car color may be similar. The brand of our car may be very similar. I saw something similar and funny in a documentary, sorry, in a movie about Sweden. In Sweden, apparently there is a grouping among the Swedish people as to what cars that they drive. There's the Volvo and there's the Saab. So people who drive Volvo, they don't like the people, not all of them, of course, but some people, they don't like the people who drive Saab, and vice versa. So even within the same society, people may differ or may see each other as similar based on the kind of car that they drive. So the civic engagement or person-to-person engagement gives us the opportunity to discover these commonalities. Therefore, come to a realization of an in-group perception on this basis. And the reverse is also true, that we can also go in the other direction and continue to divide among finer details. So when people come together as different nations, you always feel closer to people of your own nationality. If you are within the same nation, then you feel closer to people from the same region or from the same religion or from the same ethnic group. When you are within the same religion, then you begin to feel closer to people who are within the same branch of that religion. So there is no end to it. Okay? So there's no end to coming closer together, and there's no end to staying apart from each other. So what is the path that we think is the path we follow? That is the engagement, civic engagement dialogue. So I can actually slowly begin to wrap up and summarize the evidence that I shared with you. So we defined what dialogue is and civic engagement is. And in dialogue, usually we are coming to the platform, to the environment as representative of a religion or ethnicity or nationality or ideology. And the purpose of this is to exchange views and interact as representatives of that background. Whereas in civic engagement, we are coming to the platform as simply citizens. And our goal is to improve the society. But in this encounter, something else happens. So as we, for instance, for a while, I was a member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers in America, in the Dallas region. I became an officer in that organization. So, in that organization, we had people from Asia, of Asian origin. We had people of Indian origin, of white European origin, of Latino origin. We had people of all sorts. But in that organization, the Institute of Electrical and Computer Engineers, Electronics Engineers, we were not representing our background. We were simply engineers, scientists. But an interaction happened. And then when there's a question about, for instance, Turkey or Islam, then I am the natural person to ask. If there's a question about, India, a person of Indian background is the default person to ask. And our perception of that group is shaped by that individual or those individuals. So in civic engagement, we are not participating as a representative of our background. We are simply participating as a citizen or as an engineer or doctor or a mechanic or somebody or just a book lover, reading, somebody who likes reading, somebody who likes traveling. So we are there for either betterment of the society or betterment of our group, our professional group, or maybe just for a sports event, for sports activity. But a dialogue nevertheless happens. And by default, we become representatives of that background. So, the way we participate in the activity is different in civic engagement. And another difference is that civic engagement is, intended for everybody. Everybody is supposed to be engaging with other citizens and neighbors in some capacity. So here, I think I had an example. If you think about your roles in your life, how many roles that you have. You are, first of all, you are a human being, of course. That is what is common among all humans, human beings. You are a parent if you have children. You are a neighbor. You are living in a place where you have neighbors. You are a citizen of a country. You might be a citizen of a state or a region or other kinds of divisions in other countries, political divisions, partitions. You are a member of a religion, and then within that religion, you might be a member of a branch of that religion. You are a professional, an engineer, mechanic, teacher, nurse, and then you're a hobbyist. That is, you have some hobbies. Okay, so all of these roles that you have in your society allow you to engage with other citizens and other neighbors through those roles. Okay, as a citizen, you can engage in an activity that increases, civic knowledge, civic activism, or civic participation. As a neighbor, you can participate in a neighborhood association. As a parent, you can engage in parent-teacher association of the school of your kids. As a member of your religion, you can participate in, for instance, an interfaith house building project. As a hobbyist, you can participate in a club, a photographer club, a cooking club, a reading club. As a professional, a trained professional, you can participate as an engineer in an engineering society. So all of these roles in our life allow us to engage with other citizens in these capacities. So for everybody, there are multiple venues for engagement. Sometimes people who go to a different society may feel reluctant to engage because they may think that their language skills are not sufficient or their other cultural skills are not sufficient. But we should not forget that when we engage with other humans, person to person, our human engagement is more important than our linguistic or cultural engagement. Because if you remember Rumi is saying, when you come together, your human soul is the dominant force there, is the dominant influence there. Although you may not be able to express yourself fluently, you may not be able to, culturally sensitive to other person's sensitivities, still your being a human and having a human soul will be the dominant force there. So you should be courageous and engage and encourage others to engage. So for this audience, for this group of viewers, I think you are beyond engaging yourselves. I think you are all engaged in some other ways. But I think our duty, if we believe in the value of engagement and dialogue, is that we should encourage others to engage with other citizens. So how can we do that? Doing an activity for the first time may be difficult. So as persons who are more engaged, more active in these areas, we should help other people engage and make it easier for them to engage. For instance, let's say we're encouraging our fellow citizens to engage professionally, right? So we can conduct a poll. How many of you, if you are working with a group, how many of you are members of professional societies, okay? And maybe we find out 60% of them are not member of any society, or 70%. Okay, then we identify, okay, what is your professional educational background? And then we can find a person who is engaged already and then pair them up. Okay, let's say an engineer who is already a member of an engineering society. So we find the people who are engineers but who have not engaged before, and then we pair them up with an engineer who is engaged, and then let them take the other person to their first meeting as a guest to an engineering society meeting. So this makes the first engagement much more easier. Okay, just go as a guest, just see what is happening. And then the next time, maybe they will become a member. And the next time, on the 5th meeting or on the 10th meeting, they will become an officer. There are different levels of engagement within each of these activities. When you become a member of a society, there is some kind of an engagement. There is an annual meeting, maybe a monthly meeting. But if you become an officer or a volunteer or a committee member, there is more engagement. Okay, there is no end to it. So you can be engaged at a higher level, even within a society, within a professional organization. So there are different levels of this. But my point was that everybody can do this, and everybody should do this. You know, if you were to take Dr. Ashutosh Vaishnavi's findings seriously, if you were to take the findings of the neurological science seriously, everybody, not only they can engage, they should engage. And as people who believe in the value of dialogue and engagement, who believe in peace in our societies, we should encourage them to engage. And we should not just encourage them, we should help them engage, make it easier for them to engage. Okay? Sometimes maybe people may be put off by the membership fee of an organization, and it may not be really that much. Maybe we can establish a fund and say that anybody who wants to engage in a society, we're going to pay for their first year of membership. Okay, let's say it is $60 or $70, $100 or rupees, whatever your currency is. We establish a fund, gather money from the donors, and then we invite people to engage in a professional society and tell them we're going to pay for your first year's membership fee. That makes it easier. There is a prophetic saying in the Islamic tradition by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Arabic one goes like, Yassiru wa la tu'assiru, the first part of the saying. That is, make something easier, not more difficult. And in the second part, he says, endear and not frighten. Make something more lovable and do not frighten people. So, in our work as activists in dialogue and engagement, we can do the same. We can raise funds and then help people become members of the societies. We can find mentors or friends who are already engaged and then make it easier for other people to engage. So the neurological science says that civic engagement is working, dialogue is working. It is making people rewire their brains and then begin to perceive others not as a threat. The studies from the United States as to when people meet with somebody, engage with somebody, these studies show that people, when they meet with somebody, they begin to see that religion or ethnicity or group as more friendly, as less threatening. And I talked about Dr. Ashutosh Vaishnavi's experiment. Let me also give an example from my life about this meeting experience and the difference that it makes. I think I can stop there to get your questions. So I lived in America now over 29 years. It's approaching 30 years. And I first came as a graduate student. And I was a student at a professor's lab in a university. And I had a friend who was a Caucasian American. So this friend was married, and at some point they bought a house. And in America, there's this cultural tradition that they organize a house warming party. So the first time they buy a house, they invite their friends for a party. Party in the sense that you just come together, not a wild party. It is just a kind of a neighborhood party. So I was invited there, and I went there. He began to introduce me to his friends. He was telling his friends, "Oh, this is Alp, he's from Turkey," so on and so forth. When we come to one of his friends, when my friend said, "This is Alp from Turkey," he almost froze. Looked at me very carefully with big, eyes. He said, I don't forget his words. It has been, I don't know how many years. It has been, I think 27 years now. But I was so impacted by that incident that I don't forget his words. He said this. These are the first words from his mouth when he saw me. He said, oh yeah, you watch all those movies and you think they can't be all like that. This is what he said, exactly, word for word. He said, oh yeah, you watch all those movies and you think they can't be all like that. So I think what he was referring to is, there are movies about Turkey, especially the Midnight Express, where an American was jailed in a Turkish prison, and it was, very poor conditions. He was abused there. He was put in the jail with the charge of, I think, owning or selling drugs or something. Anyway, so it depicted Turkey and Turkish prisons in a very bad manner, and Turkish people in a very negative light. So that movie was that person's only information about Turkey and Turkish people. So when he met me, I did not match his image of a Turkish person. And this is what he said. Oh yeah, you watch all those movies and you think they can't be all like that. Okay? So this is just a tiny example. I'm sure in your lives, you also had similar experiences. The personal engagement is so important. But unfortunately, many citizens, many of our friends, many people are lazy. We are also lazy, but this group of viewers, these participants, you are a little less lazy than others because you believe in dialogue and you want to do something about it. So everybody is lazy. So they just live in their comfort zones. Okay, they just meet with people who are like them. They spend time with people who are like them. They don't go out of their comfort zones. So I think it is our duty as people who are more conscious, or whose consciousness level is higher than our friends, to help them engage in these ways. Now we saw that through polls, through scientific studies. In India, if anything, many of our viewers are from India. It works to reduce violence. It works to improve peace. So we should help others engage in these ways of civic engagement, especially the institutional civic engagement that Dr. Varshney encourages, which is more resilient against polarization by the politicians. So just to summarize again, there are three kinds of evidence showing that civic engagement works. One is through the polls, asking people about their perceptions, and when people meet other people of different background, their perception of that religion or ethnicity or whatever improves. The second piece of evidence is Dr. Varshney's study that when there is more civic engagement, there is less violence. And the third kind of evidence is that is the functional MRI imaging of the human brain. By default, we have an in-group, out-group perception. By default, we are more likely to label others as threats, but when we engage with them, we can rewire our brains and then stop seeing them as threats and begin seeing them as potential friends. And for our modern societies, it is much more likely that the other person is not a threat. So this is something good. So I'm going to stop here, Behzat, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer. You can ask any question. There is no guarantee of a satisfactory answer.
Thank you, Dr. Aslandogan, for your presentation. We have three people at the moment who want to ask questions. First, Asharuddin. Asharuddin, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Are they typing or are they going to speak?
No, he will be speaking himself. Asharuddin, can you hear me? Okay, maybe there's a problem with him. Shabista Naz. Shabista, please go ahead.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful presentation.
My pleasure.
Actually, I just want to know, like, in whatever, like, you have mentioned about Shutosh Varshney's work. I haven't come across to that research. But in case of India, what we are witnessing in the current times, it is going against what we are like born with. Means India is a multicultural society, as you know, right? And people are living here for centuries, together. But nowadays what we are witnessing, it is entirely different process. Like, from peace to people are moving towards conflict. They are creating hate, and these kind of propaganda which are being fed to people through social medias and news platforms are working a lot. What we have witnessed in case of Delhi riots recently. So these are the things. In that case, I don't find that kind of civic engagement happening, despite we are having that kind of historical cultural assimilation here. So I just want to know your views on that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, India is a big country. United States is also big, but India is like 3-4 times bigger in terms of population. So, sometimes when we look at the big picture, the whole society, the whole nation, we may get depressed. Overall, usually what makes the news, what appears on the news is more often the negative news. I had a personal encounter with one of the producers of a show in America called Good Morning America. So through a friend, we met with this gentleman who was a producer for Good Morning America. And I asked him, why do you guys always air more negative news? Clashes, beatings, threats and dangers. There are so many positive things going on in life. If life was so negative as the TV depicts, then we should not be living. Many more should be committing suicide. Life would be impossible to live. Life is not like that. And our experience of life, besides the news, is much more positive. But the news focus on negativity. What he told me was that he said exactly this: negative news pay our bills. This is what he said. Because human brain is more attuned to or more sensitive to negative news. Because human brain, its main job is to protect us, is to protect our life. So human brain is always asking this question: is there a threat to me? Could this person could be a threat? Could that person could be a threat? Could this situation can be a threat? Could that event be a threat to me? Could it happen here? Could something similar happen to me? Our brain is always asking these questions, right? So this is human brain. Because this is the way human brain works, media is simply responding to that psychology. So the media is sharing more threats, more potential threats, more dangers, more conflicts, and the human brain is always processing it. How can I avoid this? How can I prevent this from happening to my child? How can I prevent this from happening in my neighborhood, kind of situation? So, one of the things we can do and we can encourage others to do is to watch less news. Watching too much news actually makes us more pessimistic, because the real life is not like that. And I'm not saying that, bad things don't happen. Obviously, they do happen. So what they report in the media is most of the time, it is real. It is not imaginary. But what they don't report is that all of life is not like that. There's a conflict going on there. But in the rest of the country, in 80%, there's no conflict going on right now. There may be conflict going on in 5 cities. And then there are 955 cities, 95 cities, there is no conflict going on right now. But they don't report on where there is no conflict. Okay, so this is one thing that I want to share, that, if we watch too much news, if anybody watches too much news, they are more likely to get the picture as more negative. In the overall picture in the news, you may see this negative image, but in localities, in smaller groups, we will see that there are many more positive interactions going on. But I want to say something else too. The second thing I want to say is that, for a country like India, or even for a region of India, it is a tremendous task to do anything. In the United States, even to do something statewide in a small state, even that is a tremendous task. But we can always do something. That is, we can always set an example. Right? So maybe in India, the situation is very bad right now. There is more tension. There's more polarization. There is more, problems at the political level. That may be true, but these people who see others as threat, they have always existed. Maybe they were not visible. Maybe they were not powerful, but they have always been there. And even in the same person's brain, sometimes the threat perception goes higher and lower. So these are realities that don't go away. They come to the fore, they become more dominant sometimes, and then they recede. They never disappear, right? So we cannot change everybody, we cannot change the whole nation, but we can always set an example. So let's say we live in a small city in one part of our country. If we set up an organization where Hindus and Muslims live peacefully, right? Yeah, they have cordial relationship, respectful relationship. We set an example, and then people begin to see, oh, in this city there is an organization which has 50% Hindu, 50% Muslim, or 20% Hindu, 80% Muslim, or vice versa membership, and these guys get along very well. They send their kids to the same school, and they don't fight with each other. Even there's a fight some other place, these people come talk with each other, and they solve their differences in a civilized way. We set an example. And I think this is the only thing we can do and we should do. We should not pay too much attention to what's going on in the news or in the nation. We should try to set a good example in our locality. If we pay too much attention to negativity, that means we are sending our energy to negativity. So if we are paying too much attention to negativity, we are actually feeding that negativity. But if we are focusing on setting a good example, that means we are sending our energy to something positive. So this is something we can always do.
Thank you. Dr. Aslandogan, would you like to end your screen share so that the students can see you on the screen and you can all see them? Yeah, okay, better. Said, next.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to share, not even comment. First of all, thank you, Mr. Aslandogan, for insightful information, knowledge you shared. So I also kind of personally, I grew up in a society within a society, kind of as a minority, I can say. Yeah. So when I look back, while listening to your lecture, to your to the knowledge you shared, I kind of rolled back my memory. It reminded me of my childhood, the experience. So unfortunately, the things I don't know. Sometimes it might be due to major political interests. People are especially some groups are polarizing, right? So later, up to grade 6, I studied in my community. I went to a school which was meant just for my group of people. Later, I joined another school where it was there were a lot of people from different backgrounds. So when I compare my childhood friends, which were left behind, and now I can see their viewpoint, their viewing the world is totally different from mine. Later, as you said, engaging with others is very effective rewiring. So thanks to the new school, I was able to rewire my brain, and I also want to comment there, like destroying. I think building is more difficult. Uh, Sometimes it's easier for politicians to just destroy and like make audience for themselves. I'm very unfortunate these days, especially everywhere. In most of the place, people are just choosing easier job instead of building.
Don't forget that these things go in cycles.
Yeah.
You know, when something rises, something else comes back to balance it. So the increasing racism all around the world and grouping, populism, hopefully it will result in increased consciousness among other people, and that will also come. Just you should not forget that none of the waves is at any time is zero. They are never zero. They never go away. They just recede and then they come back. They recede and they come back. So what we can do is to contribute to more peaceful wave.
As the previous session we listened, yeah, there were the kind of question like what we can do. We are very like little. We have very like almost no power, as the Miss Lakshmi said. Yeah, what we can do, like we should pass the energy, try to come together as many like-minded people and like pray at least. Yeah, when you see something negative, you should be at least praying and like trying to spread the message so the positive energy is more and more. These like situations are, I think they are kind of training us to come together. Maybe they are like hard times make better people, hopefully better
Yes.
days are ahead. Thank
It's
you.
all part of the journey. It's all part of the human journey.
Thank you.
Right, Sabiha More.
Good evening, sir. I'm Sabiha More from Mumbai. I'm a teacher educator. I'm an associate professor. I have two
Good evening.
questions to ask you about. Of course, I'm a great supporter of multi-religious faith and multi-religious culture in my personal life too. But I visited Turkey, which is your hometown, and believe me, it was my distant dream to visit Turkey because I thought it's a bed of civilization. I went to Cappadocia, I went to all the places that were marked on the itinerary. And I went to that old town, the civilization town, I forget the name of that, Pamukkale and other things that I read. And when I went there, I saw that it is a bed of civilization. Like, forget about religion, that's a very small divide. It's civilization that rose from the valleys and the hills and the isles of Turkey. Yet, when I was talking to my guide, because I'm very inquisitive to know history, I don't know why am I like that, but wherever I go, I would like to see a museum, I would like to see an old building. So he told me in 1914, the country was divided on the basis of religion, and people who were staying in Turkey went to Greece and they came, the Muslims remained back in Turkey. And I was following one of your half post. It's my nature. Whosoever the speaker comes, I try to read about what he has done. So you have written a lot on half post, and I have gone through that. And your write up on peace building through school particularly mesmerized me, saying that you engage Kurdish children in Turkey to in more meaningful dialogue, so that they are not being attracted to what you say unsocial kind of things that they do. And you have done a lot of effort for children in Philippines and in Serbia and Bosnia and other things. That's a very lovely thing. But what I'm trying to, then why is Turkey, which is a bed of civilization, and we understand that it's a dialogue building era that has passed by in Turkey right from the Ottoman Empire, why is it that people are so scared of engaging into dialogue? I don't want to comment on the political scenario in Turkey, but they fail to address the nerves of the people, or they fail to even call people into a meaningful dialogue. They don't want. It's if I'm allowed to say, I'm not being very audacious. It's almost like a totalitarian rule in Turkey. That's what I believe. Like, and you believe me, in India, people who know a bit of Urdu like me are great lovers of Turkish serial. You know, Fatma Gul was one thing that swept away our mind as far as Turkey's culture and other things are concerned. And none of the heroines in Turkey wore a burqa, or they were having covered their head in spite of depicting a Muslim culture. One question is that. And second is peace through school. I love that idea. Don't you feel that you should engage more Indian schools into it? Probably they'll help to build a culture of peace and dialogue. Thank you very much. That was my observation, comment, inquisitiveness, whatever you call. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sure. Actually, your question, I think, can be applied to almost any civilization or the inheritors of any civilization. Talk about Greece or even India or some African countries. Humans are humans. As you said, in Turkey, great many civilizations lived. What is now Turkey, of course, it was not Turkey for a long time. It was Anatolia. Even before it was Anatolia, it was probably named something else, or maybe did not have a name. Some people in Turkey do inherit the great features of those civilizations. For instance, we have the great Rumi, the mystic, Sufi mystic poet, and there are many people in Turkey who are influenced by him, and they will exemplify him. But people being people, we also have people with a totalitarian mentality, authoritarian mentality, and at the moment, such people are ruling Turkey. So I have never defended Turkey as a country, and I think in every country there are people who kind of inherit the great aspects of their civilizations, and then there are others who are disconnected from those aspects. In terms of the Kurds and the Turks in Turkey, it has to do more with the formation of Turkish Republic. Turkish Republic was formed as a kind of a nation state based on the Turkish identity. So the foundational leaders of Turkey decided that this is just a country for Turks. So they disregarded the Kurds. They almost denied their cultural identity and even existence. They even claimed they were mountain Turks. Laughable. They speak a different language, for God's sake. So as Hizmet movement, our friends have engaged the Kurdish population. In Hizmet movement, we have about 10 to 15% Kurdish participants, and schools and tutoring centers were established in the Kurdish heavy regions to help those kids get better careers, empowered through education, and also be positive influences in the society. So I think, just as I talked about the waves of peace and reconciliation versus waves of racism and supremacy. So in Turkey now, the authoritarian wave is dominant. That doesn't mean all Turkish people have turned authoritarian. There are people who see this and who are displeased with it, and I hope that democratically they will change things. But in the cycle of things, cycle of life, Turkey is going through an authoritarian cycle right now. You can say the same thing for Greece. Greece is a bed of civilization. So many philosophers in the prehistoric era came from Greece. But more recently, Greece did not do a very good job in any aspect of life. So the same applies there. But there are great Greek people. Greek people are now actually welcoming our friends who have to escape Turkey. I have a friend who is a professor of literature who is jailed in Turkey. What could a professor of literature have done to deserve to be jailed for years? You just imagine, what could he have possibly done? He has done nothing, just criticize the president or be with the group who is seen as against the president. That's it. And our friends who escaped to Greece are welcomed by the Greeks, and they are treated humanely. So, who is the good guy, who's the bad guy? I am no longer looking at people as Turks or Greeks or, Muslims or Hindus or anything. I am just looking at people as people. Sometimes people talk about, we consider the map of the world, like the political map. you see boundaries and colors, right? You know, geometry tells us that with 6 colors, you can color all the countries of the world without touching any 2 colors each other. So when you look at the political map of the world, you see these divisions and borders and colors. If you consider the religious map of the world, you can come up with a map, you know, with the dominant religion in every region. You can come up with a map. You have boundaries and colors. But if you think about people whose life is dominated by hope, love, connection, and contribution, versus people whose life is dominated at this time by fear, by supremacy, or by hate. If you look at this world, what do you see? You see a world where there is no boundary and there is no color. It is mixed everywhere. In India, there are people who are driven by hope and love and connection. And in India, there are people who are driven by hate and division. In America, the same story. In Turkey, the same story. So, you know, in this stage of my life, especially after the last 5 years of our friends being persecuted in Turkey by fellow Turks, by fellow Muslims, you know, we are observant Muslims within Hizmet movement. Most of our friends, not everybody, but most of our friends are Turkish Muslims, some Kurdish Muslims. They are being persecuted by Turkish Muslims. So what does it mean really to be Turkish and Muslim? It doesn't, you know, as a label, it doesn't mean anything to me now. It only, you know, I only look at as a human, what is dominant in your life? And I want to be a friend with fellow humans who share the hope and the love and the connection. And I want to try to help others who have lost their true identity, which is the human soul.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
I didn't respond to your question about schools.
Yeah, I was talking, why can't you have that?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, in India, there is such an experience, such a, you know, collective wisdom. You know, we should take advantage of that and also work with fellow, you know, Indian human beings to also try to help solve India's problems. The same applies to many other places.
And if I may ask, what is your take on converting Sophia Hagia into a mosque? Like, if you ask me, I am against it. It is a monument, a beautiful one. One goes there, you are mesmerized by the kind of architecture and the painting, and the other thing is, I don't know what was the need for it to convert. Turkey has got enough mosque, like every corner, this thing is there. There was no need to convert it into a mosque. If you look at the mosque that Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has made in Medina, it's just a small little mosque where people like me of 5, 6 will have to bow their head and go inside. So what was the whole politics of converting Sophia Hagia into a mosque? I don't know. I don't understand that, you know.
Yeah, a colleague of mine recently wrote that Hagia Sophia, you know, maybe opened for worship only one time. That was the original opening. That was for worship, and that was for Christian worship. So the conversion during Sultan Mehmet II time was essentially political. It was basically as a sign of a new political power taking over this part of the world. From a religious point of view, there is hardly a justification. I mean, people make justifications, but you know, if you consider it, it is really political. And the latest conversion, you know, the second conversion during the early Turkish Republic into a museum was also political. And now this conversion is also political. You know, as you said, there are no, you know, need for new mosques. You know, unfortunately, Turkish people have a kind of a romantic relationship to that mosque, and they are, most of them are actually happy to see it being converted back to a mosque. But I think they fail to realize that this is a political decision.
Thank you, sir.
Nitya Prakash.
Yes, hello, sir. Thank you so much for your enlightening lecture, especially the scientific foundations. It was really it was an eye opener for, I'm sure, many of us, especially for me, to really, you know, especially the Varshney study that in India it spoke of, like, you know, especially the cities like Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, which are historically so diverse in nature. And how come even institutionally they are so strong, but there could not be an institutional engagement. So sir, can we understand this is that of a threat of diversity, that why people find diversity so threatening, and how can we derive a strength within diversity? And so my question is linked within there, that when we engage in a dialogue or an interaction or an engagement, so you also pointed out that, you know, at times our purpose can be to convert, to unify, to compromise, and to debate. And that is, I feel, mostly our purposes. You know, we come across with a very self-righteous view that what I know is right. So, or at times, even if we know the issue, the purpose, the intent might be that of an appeasement or sympathy, but not true understanding. So my question, to put it simply, is that with what psychological attitude should we approach an engagement? Like this bond of connection. It should be whether to understand, to know, or to find a common ground. So yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I mean, both very good comments and questions. The first one, why people are afraid of diversity. This is something about our inner state of being. So why are you afraid of diversity, which means difference? Why are you afraid of it? Most likely that you would like the world to look like you. That is because you see difference as a threat because of earlier experiences, or maybe the experience of your parents or your fellow community members. Right? So it really has to do with an inner sense of insecurity. The more insecure you feel in yourself, the less tolerant of diversity you are. The more secure you feel in your inner self, the more tolerant and the more embracing you become. If you are so secure as your soul is dominating your life, then you don't see any threats at all. Even, you know, threats against your lives, you don't see them as threats. And, you know, we see people in history, you know, sages that come across threats of life. And then we see them smoothly coming out of that threat because they don't see it as a threat. And a threatening person, you know, in a matter of a few seconds or a minute, turning into a friend. Right? So this really has to do with our inner sense of security. So, you know, working in our inner self to really identify our inner identity, or true identity, is the panacea for this. If we first identify as a human soul, not as a, you know, nationality, you know, member of a nation or a group or religion, then that means all the other divisions are simply for organizational purposes, right? So, you know, for parents among us, and we have all been children, we had parents, right? So everybody, you know, who's a child had parents. You know, the parents have children, and the parents take care of children. So does it mean that you have to harm other children? Does it mean that you have to take away some other child's food to feed your own child? No, it is just a matter of organization. It is an organizational principle that the parent will take care of the child. If you look at the nationality and the religion and all the other divisions in this way, they are simply for organizational purposes, to organize things so that nobody will be left alone without food or shelter or protection. If we look at it that way, no division is threatening, no difference is threatening. But if we feel in our inner self as insecure, then we begin to see the difference as threatening. And again, I mean, when I say this, I don't mean to be like Pollyannish. I don't mean to say that there are no real threats in life. There are real threats in life. I think our criteria should be that our threat perception should be evidence-based. You know, is that rational? Is it scientifically based, our threat perception, or is it simply, you know, a perception that we developed as a child from our culture, from our neighborhood, but it is not based on real data? So, I mean, there are other experiments about this. I don't want to go into them. You know, how people's perception of the threat matches with the real likelihood of the threat, you can study those. But I think the tolerance and embracing of diversity has to do with our inner being, inner state. Now, in your second part, could you remind me? You said something else in your second part of your.
So my question was that what should be our attitude when we approach an engagement? Because most of the time we do it with a very self-righteous, or that I'm the all-knower.
Yes.
So when we engage,
I have the better religion. I have a funny anecdote about this. I want to share two things with you. One of them is our friends in America, and especially after 9/11, were reaching out to Christian churches and inviting them for interfaith dialogue. And in one case, they knocked on the door of a church, met with the pastor, and the pastor told them right away, if you don't believe like me, you're destined for hell, and I don't need to speak with you. So, they could not go very far, but among the churches that they knocked the doors of, many of them actually responded positively. Now, we have a colleague named Dr. Jill Carroll, who was a teacher of world religions at Rice University in Houston. And he says something that I find very valuable. She says, you may believe that I'm going to hell, but let's not turn this world into hell. Let's make this world more livable. And you may believe that somebody is going to hell. That's your belief. You're entitled to your belief. So your questions about our attitude in engagement, I mentioned in my presentation that in interfaith dialogue, especially from Hizmet movement's perspective, we don't see that as an activity for conversion or compromise or debate, because we don't see any fruits when you approach dialogue or engagement with that intention. You may be convinced that your religion or your belief is the best one. That there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't believe that your belief is the best, you would look for some other belief. So that's fine. I mean, you may think that your religion or belief system is the best. Some people believe that's the only true one. Some people have a more flexible view. They believe theirs is the best, but there is truth in other religions as well. And then there are even other people who think that every person, according to their nature, they adopt a belief system, and that is the right one for them. There are different views. It doesn't matter. What matters is that once you begin to proselytize people, once you try to convince people or win an argument and show and prove that your religion or belief is better, then the atmosphere is poisoned. Nothing good usually comes out of that atmosphere. Even if you convince the other person, if you can make a logical argument or evidence-based argument that your belief system is more right, the other person may be defeated logically, but they will not embrace your faith. It doesn't happen that way. Embracing of another belief system or faith happens only when you see somebody exemplifying their values and beliefs, and you admire that. It only happens then, right? So, we find coming to the platform of dialogue and engagement with the intention of proving your belief superior or convincing others or proselytizing others or winning a debate, we find them unproductive. If you want to do a debate, you can do that, nothing wrong with that. Just come with with honesty. You say, let's debate this issue. Okay, let's debate whether there is such a thing or not. Okay, and then our intention is debate. Our intention is to put forth arguments. You can do that, but don't come to dialogue or engagement with the intention to prove something. When you engage with somebody in civic engagement, there is all sorts of interactions going on, and humans are very perceptive, very attentive to others. Although you may not speak so much, people will be looking at your manner, behavior, your unspoken language. So a lot of interaction will happen anyway. So our approach what we recommend is to come with an open mind, come to learn, come in a humble way, because there are things that we can learn from anybody. In the Sufi tradition, there are stories about this. one Sufi master is recorded saying, I learned from this virtuous good person, and I learned from this despicable bad person. They say, oh, what did you learn from that other person? He said, I learned how not to be from that person. So there is something that we can learn from everybody. If you come with humility, we will be the one who is the winner at the end. And it often happens the case that when we come with humility as a humble person, then the other person is more interested in us too. If we come with the inner belief that, oh, I have the superior belief, let's see what you think, I'm going to show you that you're wrong, then that person will not be open to us anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ziaul Hassan.
Yeah, hello. Good evening all.
Good evening.
Thank you, Dr.
For me, it's good morning, by the
Aslandogan,
way. I'm in California, it is morning.
yeah. Yeah. Good morning to you. And
we are exactly 12 hours behind.
Thanks a lot for yeah, okay. Your presentation was really amazing. And the thing that you have figured out that, yeah, after 9/11, the situation of Muslims and the Islam towards the whole world has been changed completely. The image, rather, the situation, it's an image that has been changed. And there is a sudden hatred started against Islam in the whole. Right, so in your presentation that you have given the example, most of the example of the US, that the polls that happened after that incidents and all, and the things that people mind has changed. So a similar situation has happened in India also, like that after 2014. The similar kind of sudden hatred has started among a particular community in the similar way, just like that started. And I'm very positive and with your presentation that you have discussed about the solution to those things. That in this previous section, it is third week of this course, and in the previous sessions, we have discussed a lot about the causes of these conflicts and all, and how we have to start the dialogue to solve it. But in your presentation, you have to discuss the things that how to solve these situations, these conflicts with forming dialogues. And you have given some examples, right, that through citizens, the role of society, how we play our role in the society to sort out these things. You have given the examples of the neighbors, parents and all. But here I will just point out, I don't know how much you have researched about the Indian scenario, the present scenario, and that is going on to, about the Muslims and the majority. So here the things cannot be just like that you have pointed out in case of the US citizens. Here even the neighbors that you have taught, we have to involve civic engagement, right? With the having a good relation with the neighbors. Here the relation was already good with the neighbors. They have nothing conflict in between. But the people here not seeing them as their neighbors. They are just have a image of a Muslim, as of an image of Islam. They don't think that they are their neighbors and living with them from so many years. They have a whole one image of Islam which is very negative. So the people, the neighbors are seeing them with that image, not with as their neighbors, not as their parents. Even parents are guiding their children not to get friends with the Muslims. So this is the scenario, this is the situation of the Indians, that neighbors are, they're not allowing to get home property, get the flats to Muslims and near to them and all. So this is the situation that is happening in this era in India. So I know you are not the our country representative to answer these questions, but I just want to know about your perspective, that how these things, how the solution that you have put forward towards us, will be helpful in sorting out these things. So this is my question, come comments, or I just need your suggestion for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be, too, disconnected with the realities of the world. I know that in many parts of the world there are harsh realities, tensions, enmities and clashes and conflicts and beatings and killings. Of course, I'm not denying all of those are real. What I'm saying is that, there is this study which showed that when you look at the bigger picture, civic engagement at the institutional level under an umbrella, overall, it does seem to make a difference. And in terms of the anecdotes I shared with you, some of my experiences, this kind of a generic scenario happens all the time. Somebody sees another group as bad, right? So Muslims seeing Hindus as bad, Hindus seeing Muslims as bad, both of them seeing Christians as bad, Christians seeing Hindus and Muslims as bad, so on and so forth. It happens all the time. And then you see, among some people here, some kind of an engagement. And then you begin to see, a person there saying, all Muslims are bad, but this person, Ziaul Hazan, he's not that bad. He's okay. And then they meet, Abul Kalam or Nitya. They begin to say, well, there are two of them who are not so. If I'm mixing religions, please excuse me. I'm just giving an example. They begin to say, all of them are bad, but there's just these two who are good. Or maybe Hindus and Christians. Christians are bad, but I know this guy named John. He's not that bad. In my childhood, in my youth in Turkey, there was this left-right division. It was very much like what you described. Okay, people would look at each other to immediately categorize them. Is it a leftist or a rightist? So left is this socialist communist, and the right is this nationalist, basically a Turkish nationalist. And they would look for signs to categorize, and they would immediately label them as enemy or bad or a threat to the society, right? But if they actually had a friendship, have some kind of an engagement, they would say, all the leftists are bad people, but there's this one guy, John, he's not so bad because he knew him, right? And if he met two people from the left or from the right, they would say, no, there are two people who are good, all the rest is bad. So this is the human experience. Keep this in mind. The more meaningful exchange of interfaces we have, the more kind of finer detail, more flexible our perception will be of that other group. There is a complicating factor here, which is the collective consciousness and the waves of the society that also affects people. What you just described actually happened in many societies. I am partially of Bosnian origin. It happened in Bosnia. My grandparents migrated to Turkey many centuries ago, but I have been watching the events in Bosnia. So until the dissolution of the Yugoslavia, there were neighbors, Bosnian and Serbian and Croatian neighbors living next to each other, just like neighbors, Hindus and Muslims in India. And then when the country dissolved, all of a sudden neighbors began killing each other, right? So this happens. This has to do with the collective wave of kind of a breakdown of the consciousness, okay? That will happen, but even in those cases, you see good examples. Even in those cases, you see people saving a person from another group, saving people, family from another group, helping people from another group. Out of 100 people, 80 people turn violent, and then 20 of them help save others. Still that happens. So, if we focus too much on the negativity, we paralyze ourselves. We cannot do anything. I think we should focus on what we can do and what works. So I presented to you scientific evidence of what works. So what does that mean? That means we should help more people engage in civic engagement in an institutional way and on a daily basis. That is something that we can do, and that is the only thing that will satisfy our hearts.
Right.
Thank you, Dr.
Mushtaq Sikandar.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aslandogan, for your nice, beautiful presentation. I am from Kashmir, and today is a very sad day for Kashmir because our friend and a very vocal votary of interfaith dialogue and dialogue between Kashmiri Pandits and Muslims has been assassinated just now. His name was Advocate Babar Qadri. So it's with a heavy heart that I am
Very
here.
sorry. May he rest in peace.
So I don't have a question. I just have an observation, and you can just comment about that. Regarding the Ashutosh Varshani study that you quoted, I had gone through that study about communal rights because communal rights is something that I have been reading about. Asghar Ali Engineer and others have done a pioneering work in this field. But related to the civic engagement that Professor Varshani talks about, in context of Kashmir, we, most of us in the valley, we have been converts from Hinduism to Islam. And then after this conversion, a small Pandit Hindu minority survived in Kashmir. But when during the 90s, when the armed insurgency against the Indian state started in Kashmir, that Hindu minority, whether with the help of state or other such issues, they have to leave from Kashmir. So, despite having centuries of civic engagement, even we share the same kind of cultural spaces, public spaces. Even some of our castes are same between the Kashmiri Hindus and Kashmiri Muslims, because again we are converts. Even some of the shrines and hospices were the spaces of engagement. Even Sufism developed here, indigenous kind of a strand that's known as the Rishiism that was inspired by Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. So, but the condition and the politics basically damaged that kind of civic engagement could not save the Pandits from leaving the valley. Whether it was orchestrated by the state or non-state actors, that's not the debate. But the debate is despite having centuries of coexistence and civic engagement, they had to leave. And in case of India also, we witness that today that Muslims and Hindus have survived since centuries, and Indian Muslims, majority of them are converts. They are not, basically, most of them are not settlers or migrants from outside. So again, this theory does not of civic engagement that even if the civic engagement happens, then the killings would be less and other things. I don't find it quite pragmatic. So that's basically my comment, because populism and media and other things, they have the power and politics to divide basically the people and make them flee. And despite having centuries of mutual civic engagement and coexistence, it can't survive. So that's my observation, and you can comment on that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I totally, I can relate to how you see the situation. And again, it is not imaginary. What you're saying is real. My comment would be that two things. The first thing is a repetition. That is, sometimes events are influenced by factors that are beyond the local domain. Sometimes, the event in Kashmir or in a particular region will be dominated by a larger factor. I mean, we had the World War, right? We have now the pandemic, right? Pandemic is knowing no borders. It is affecting everybody, everywhere, right? So sometimes things happen that is beyond the neighborhood or the region or the community. In Kashmir, as you suggested, there have been a long time of engagement, but now everything seems to be in shambles. Does it mean it did not do any good? I don't think so. I think maybe it prevented for a century, I don't know, maybe more violence. Maybe it did prevent more violence. Maybe it prevented many more clashes. So I don't think we can say it did not work. It was not sufficient to solve the problem. It was not sufficient to solve the problem in an amicable way among the communities. But another study can be done to see if it actually helped Kashmir live in relative peace within this time. So there's one comment that I want to make, that sometimes bigger factors, dynamics can come in and destroy the local dynamics. That happened all the time, all around the world. So my other comment is, I already hinted at it. My other comment is that, it is about what we set our aim to be, right? So if we set our aim to be, a peaceful resolution of the Kashmiri conflict, then we may be setting up ourselves for failure. If we set our aim as help as many Hindus and Muslims in Kashmir live as long as possible in peace, that's a different goal, right? So rather than setting ourselves for failure by setting big goals that has political dimensions, that has to be whole country, maybe whole continent, and international dynamics, rather than setting our sights in those goals, I would set my aim smaller. Can we help have this community live a peaceful life as long as possible? Set an example here. So you might have heard different versions of this saying. Many people said something similar. We cannot do great things, right? But we can do small things with great passion, with great compassion, with great care, with great love. So I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Urusa Mushtaq.
Hello, good morning, sir. It was a very nice session. I really enjoyed. So I have to actually, I don't know if it's an observation or a question, but this is something which is a reflection from something that a documentary that I watched a couple of years ago. I believe the filmmaker was a Turkish filmmaker. It was Adele Piaf, and she made this documentary called Whose Song Is This Anyway? I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. So the idea of the documentary was that she was sitting in a tea house in Istanbul with a couple of her friends from the Balkans, from Serbs, Bosnians, and so on. And the song played.
You unmuted yourself. Sorry, muted yourself.
When did I mute myself? Do I have to repeat?
Okay. You just began to tell the Istanbul cafe story.
Yeah. So she was sitting in this tea house in Istanbul with a couple of her Balkan friends from the Balkans, Serbs, Bosnians. I just refer to it as the Balkans. And a song played, and everyone had different reactions to that song. So, for the Serb, it was a romantic song, it was a romantic ballad, and for the Bosnian, it was a war march. And for someone else, it was about a martyr being extolled, and so on and so forth. So it was not a very pleasant conversation on that table. So it forced her, she made it in the year 2003 or 4, early 2000s. So she went on to go through through the entire Balkans to find out that whose song is this? Like, who has the cultural whole of that song? And the result was not pleasant at all. In fact, the documentary is a poorly made one. I mean, if anyone is interested, they can watch it for themselves. So what she ended up doing, which I am assuming she did not want to do, was that she created further, cultural instigations. She was sitting in a Serbian club and she played the Hungarian version of it without telling them that she was going to do that. And it created a riot in that club. And she had to be taken out of that club with the help of the officers, like the officials. Right. So one of the critique of that documentary was that she did it with no consideration for the fact that the war was not a long lost reality. It was a very recent thing. And also she did not have a lot of understanding of the regional variations in the Balkans. Since you yourself mentioned that you were a Bosnian, so you have a much better understanding than I do. So my question was that, is there a good time to engage in civic engagement? And given that there is a good time to engage in civic engagement, will we not be losing time and giving that time for that, threat to be cemented? Because if you are giving it a time frame, you cannot do it immediately 5 years after a war has taken place, immediately 5 years after an ethnic cleansing has taken place. Aren't we giving time for that, threat to be cemented? I mean, I just don't understand. Are we supposed to just start it right away, or are we supposed to wait? And another thing from what Mushtaq Sikandar said was that that centuries of civic engagement have not been able to do anything for the Kashmiri Pandits and the Kashmiri Muslims. That's basically what I am studying. I'm a student of intercultural dialogue, and my PhD is based on Jammu and Kashmir. I would like to say is that one thing that we ignore, and most of us from the Valley do, is we are exclusionary. And besides being exclusionary, we forget that those centuries of dialogue were accompanied by increasing instances of structural violence. There was structural violence which went along with that dialogue. So when you are talking to other person, at the same time, there is some violence that is being inflicted on you. So it's like, it's a plus minus thing, and it eventually becomes minus. You're not able to do anything which is plus. So that was another thing. But yeah, my basic question is there any good time for us to engage in civic engagement?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure. No, very, very valid points. So let me give you an example from my religious background as a Muslim. Recently a few books came out that is giving a different picture of the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So if as a Muslim we are to take his example, actually in his life we see answers to all that you pointed out and asked now. That is, yes, indeed there are times civic engagement is a luxury. You need to take more concrete measures to prevent a threat, or there are things that you need to do to stop persecution or violence. And the Prophet did that, but throughout his life, what we see is that there is not a single individual in the Mecca, Medinian, Arabian society that he did not try to establish a contact with. And among these individuals, think about the early, the people, the nobles of the Mecca, what they did to early Muslims, right? They shackled them, they killed some of them, tortured them, took away their homes, they drove them away from their homes. But what did the Prophet do, ﷺ? The first time he peacefully took over Mecca, he forgave them. Unimaginable. These people who killed Muslims and tortured Muslims, and at the very least, he could have sought justice. He could have at least say, okay, those people who killed Muslims unjustly, we're gonna try them. He didn't do that. Those people who took away Muslims' homes, we're gonna punish them. He didn't do that. He forgave them. Right? And we see he tried to reach out to Abu Sufyan before he became Muslim. He tried to reach out to his worst enemies. If he's an example for us, that means that we need to try to establish a connection. Maybe you have heard the story, I don't know. When he passed away, his shield was a collateral in a Jewish resident of Medina. When the Prophet passed away, his shield was a collateral for a loan in the hand of a Jewish resident of Medina. And the occasion was that sometimes when the Prophet received guests, he treated them, he saw them as personal guests, so he spent from his own money to feed them. So on this particular occasion, he did not have anything in hand, so he asked a Sahabe, a friend, to go to this Jewish merchant and then get some food on a loan. And when the Sahabe went to the Jewish merchant, the merchant said, well, how do I know that he's gonna pay me back, right? So the Sahabe came back to the Prophet and said, this is what he said. He didn't become angry. He just said, Subhanallah, if he doesn't trust me, whom he can trust? I'm the most trustworthy person on earth. But he didn't get angry. He didn't say, go punish that person. He said, give this shield to this merchant and then get some food for my guests. Okay. So the Sahabe went with the shield, gave it to the Jewish merchant as a collateral, and got the food to feed the guests. And then the Prophet died. So the shield remained in the Jewish merchant as a collateral. So the author, the Siyar writers are asking, wasn't there a single person in Medina who could give the Prophet the food or the money to buy the food? Did he have to loan something from the Jewish merchant? He didn't have to. Remember, this is not the poor times of Medina. This is the end of the life of the Prophet. They had plenty of food and money going around, right? So, but the Prophet himself intentionally chose a life of, I don't want to call it poor, but you understand what I mean. a modest life. So, so the CR authors are saying that the Prophet, through this loaning relationship, was seeking a dialogue with the Jewish merchant. And obviously, as a prophet, he would like to get the message of Islam to the Jewish person. But we see that in many cases, it did not result in Jewish Medinans becoming Muslim. Most of them did not become Muslim. A small minority of them did, but most of them did not become Muslim. So what was the Prophet seeking there? Did he not know that they would not convert? He knew that. But it was peace in the Medina society. The relationship between the Jews and the polytheists, pagan Arabs and the Muslims, the relationship was a more peaceful relationship as a result of that. As a result of this dialogue, this engagement, Jews and Muslims in Medina spent many years of peaceful neighborly relationships. So in answer to your question, what is the best time? It is all the time. There is no best time. But what we do may be different. If there's an imminent threat, obviously, I'm not going to say, oh, let's civically engage with you. I'm going to stop the threat. I'm going to try to stop the threat. I'm going to try to save people. I'm going to try to stop that person from harming others. But if we are in the next stage, maybe there's no threat right now. There's no violence. There's no riot right now. So right now is the time to build future relationships. It may not stop a national wave of racism, but it may stop maybe 5 people from this community from participating in the riot. Isn't that success? That is success.
Design our own images.
Thank you. Vishal Prasad.
Not really images, but they're very informative illustrations of.
I'm Vishal, and my question is, I've picked up 2 points in your presentation. In the first slide, you mentioned about the atmosphere where, and it was the third scientific evidence that you produced before us, where you are saying that people's mind are trained to be biased towards the others. So my question is, how we can be helpful to create an atmosphere that could be conducive to have the dialogue or the civic engagement?
Okay, that's a very good question too. So in the 3 pieces of scientific evidence, in one of them, I mentioned that the human brain is predisposed to see difference as a threat, potential threat. I mean, if you think about it, for a baby, for a child, that makes perfect sense, right? So the baby or the child needs protection all the time. And for them to be wired to seek people who look like the child makes perfect sense. But as we grow up, as we become adults, then we need to get out of this child situation, child conditioning, and then be able to embrace the difference more naturally. And the second thing, of course, was the social learning that takes place, especially through the media, through the culture, through the stories that we hear from our parents, from our neighbors, from our friends. Such and so happened there, and then these people did that, etc. So this is the social conditioning. There is both natural and there is both social. So what is the atmosphere that is most conducive to engagement? That is the atmosphere where, I mean, I cannot claim to be an expert on this, but I'm going to refer to the work by David Ruck, who talks about social needs. It is an atmosphere where the people's social needs are met as much as possible and the social threats are minimized. So David Ruck talks about 5 social needs and 5 associated threats. And he came up with this acronym SCARF, S-C-A-R-F. So S is for status, A is for, C for certainty, A is for autonomy, R is for relatedness, and F is for fairness, right? So to make an environment conducive to engagement, the goal should be, as much as possible, to meet people's social needs: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, and eliminate the reverse, which is perceived as a threat. For instance, status, what does that mean? In an organization, we can give titles to people depending on what they do. We can make people officers, we can give them roles, committee chairman, committee member, so that people feel that they have a status. The second one is certainty. That is, there should be some kind of a structure, okay? We have a plan, we have a schedule, we have a roadmap, so people know what we are doing, where we are going. The third one is autonomy. One person should not control everything. It should be, semi-democratic. At least there should be some level of autonomy in a person. R is relatedness. There must be activities and actions where people feel they belong. And then fairness, nobody should be treated unfairly. Everybody should feel that they are treated fairly, right? So if you think about the reverse of these things are the threatening ones. So if you humiliate somebody in the middle of everybody, that is threatening to their status and relatedness. Okay? That will not be an environment conducive to engagement. If you treat people unfairly, that will not be conducive. Okay? If people don't feel they belong, you use exclusive language or preferential language or actions, they don't feel belong, it will not be constituted engagement. So, this is just one thing that I wanted to share that I know, but I'm sure, in the literature you can find other conditions for fruitful engagement. So, Behzat, are we approaching the end of the program? Because I will also need to leave.
Yes, so we have two more questions,
Okay.
Saif and Abul Kalam Azad. So, Saif first. Mohammed Saif.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Aslandogan, for such a fantastic presentation. My question was more related to social media and how technology has become such a huge part of our lives. I mean, we're talking about civic engagement, but much more than engaging with other people, even with our family, we spend a lot of time on social media, be it on Messenger or WhatsApp or Facebook, Instagram, whatever, right? And I think recently this technology has become a force that has, never been seen before in humanity, in the history of humanity, basically. Anyone who has an agenda, anybody who has a propaganda, they can easily transmit their messages to, hundreds and thousands of people just with a click of a button, right? And I feel like this technology has allowed the divide between people to, become wider and wider and wider. And I don't see it stopping like anytime soon, until and unless we find a way where we can actually, stop that mindfully. Looking at a few, historical examples, let's see Myanmar a few years ago, there was this huge, injustice against the Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar, right? A lot of people died, a lot of people got killed. And that was mainly because, this propaganda was being transferred through WhatsApp and Facebook, and people were, being fed hate through that channel. And the same thing is going on in India right now with the protests and everything. And I think because social media provides this echo chamber where if a person has a slight negative feeling and they seek for information to, justify their negative feeling, then they will get all of it. And social media companies are fully equipped, and they encourage that negative news, like you said, right? Negative news pays our bills, right? The same way social media is the same. The negative things and the negative emotions that allow people to spend more time on social media, it fuels their advertisers, basically. So at this age, and at this age of technology especially, how can we even think about creating a dialogue? I mean, with like millions and millions of people engaging in these violent groups and being indoctrinated by people with agendas, how can we as individuals or very small groups make a difference?
Yeah, again, very valid points. There is a big truth there. Social media was very promising when it first came out, and then it quickly became, unfortunately, a tool of more hatred, more division. So that is truth. It may be argued that it is serving more harm and negativity than positivity and benefit. That may be the case. But that doesn't change our position, I think. Just as we cannot change big events in our society, we cannot change the nature of social media. One thing is certain, too much social media engagement is not healthy. That is not natural, and it is harming ourselves, our children, our adults, everybody. So if it is possible to reduce that and to increase human interaction, that is more healthy. So that is one thing we can try to do whenever we have a power, we have an influence, we have a chance, then we can encourage more human interaction, less social media interaction. That is one thing. Second thing is, I want to share an insight from a media PR expert. Just as the news media focus on negative stories, he said that media usually focus on three C's. Conflicts, C, controversies. Now the third C is important for us, and it pertains to your question. The third C is compelling news. Compelling news. The media also pays attention to compelling news. So what is compelling news? Compelling news is a story that is unexpected. It doesn't have to have all these properties, but one feature is unexpected. Two, it is beautiful or aesthetic. It's appealing in an aesthetic way. Third, it has a good story. Right? And then you can add other elements to this. Let me give you a striking example that you'll probably remember. So in the world now, in general, Russia's President Putin doesn't have a very good reputation. He is referred to as an authoritarian leader, especially in the West, in the United States, obviously in America, he doesn't have a good reputation. Now, a while ago, maybe a year ago or so, maybe 2 years ago, there was multiple photographs of Putin published in almost every publication in America. Those photographs were Putin in a natural park in Russia, fishing. Do you remember those? I see some people nodding. Yeah. So the pictures were beautiful. You want to be there. You want to be in that natural park in Russia and fish with Putin because they were so appealing. And Wall Street Journal, New York Times, everybody published it with no negative stories because they were just compelling. So what we can do in social media is we cannot stop the negative news. We cannot stop people from paying attention to negative news. It's about the level of consciousness that they have. Okay, how much time they will spend on watching media or social media, what they will pay attention to, it is a level of consciousness. We can help them increase their level of consciousness. Of course, that's a whole education and development program, increasing level of consciousness of everybody, starting with ourselves. Okay, that is what we need to do anyway, all the time. But what we can do in social media is we can try to present things in a compelling way. All right. So just an event, a good event happening, Muslims, Hindus coming together may be good, but may not be compelling. How to make it compelling? Maybe we take two, recognized people, one Hindu, one Muslim. We can have them hold hands, walk in a very historic, very famous street, hire a professional photographer, take a very high quality picture, these two famous people, Hindu and Muslim, walking together on a historical path, right? So make it compelling, or maybe just a beautiful Hindu child giving a flower to a beautiful Muslim child, something like that. You know, make it compelling somehow, either story-wise or unexpected, right? You know, somebody burns or demolishes somebody else's place of worship, and then people of another religion helps them rebuild it, right? Unexpected. So unexpected, beautiful, appealing, compelling story. This is something that we can do also in social media. Unfortunately, you know, the things that we do normally are not seen as newsworthy. So to make it newsworthy, we need to think about it. Usually we think more about event planning. We don't think about promotion, right? So we can think about how to make it compelling. And you know, there are resources on how to try to make something compelling. Let me give you an example from an expert whom we met, and also I read his book. There was a company who makes airplanes, and this company came up with a new airplane, a private jet, small private business jet, and they want this to be the news. Now the news people say that's not newsworthy. Okay, your company made a new airplane. Okay, big deal. You know, we're not going to publish anything about it. You know, for this company, they spend millions and millions of dollars. They hire designers. They are producing new materials and so on and so forth. It's big for them. For the world, it doesn't mean anything. So they hired this professional. He took the plane, put it in the sunset or sunrise, I think it is sunset, and put the CEO of the company on top of the plane and took a picture with that. In beautiful sunset, the airplane and the CEO on the top of the plane. It's a dangerous position. It's a beautiful picture. And then they did one other thing. They said that in the world today, there's a trend. Instead of buying planes, business leaders are renting planes, or vice versa. Instead of renting planes now, they are beginning to buy planes. There's a trend. So they combine a beautiful picture with that trend information to make this story newsworthy. So we need to be thinking out of the box, make our positive things compelling so that they can spread in social media. So, you know, again, if you look at the overall picture, you may get depressed. Just focus on what you need to do and do it.
Finally,
Question,
yes, Abul Kalam Azad, finally, from Bangladesh. Yeah.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and good morning, Alp Aslandogan.
Thank you.
So my question would be a bit different. Is all we are talking about the different society, different religion, how we can make a dialogue, a discussion with them. But let us focus on the Arab world. Let's say if I see the history from there, I mean from the Babylonian, I would say from the Mesopotamia, I mean civilization, always there is conflict going on. Although they are from the same religion, same, I would say they have the same language, same background. But why they cannot make a discussion among themselves and they cannot, I mean, resolve this conflict? I mean, why there is from the, I mean, I would say from the beginning of the world, there is conflict going on. This is my question. Thank you very much.
Did you say Arab world or the whole world?
Arab world, I would say.
Arab world, yes, yes. I'm going to repeat something that is a bit controversial, and you know, feel free to object to it in your mind. I think we give too much credit to religion in shaping people's lives. You know, ideally, from the religious perspective, yes, you know, Islam or you know whatever your religion is. I know that there's no such thing as Hinduism. There are different, you know, traditions. So whatever that tradition is, Christianity, Judaism, or the branch of the Judaism and Christianity that you belong to, whatever that is, you know, ideally that is supposed to shape your life. But is that really the case? You know, does Islam really shape the lives of Arabs or Turks or anybody else? I just gave the example. You know, I have a professor friend, professor of literature, who is in a prison in Turkey now. He is an observant Muslim Turkish person. He is ethnically Turkish, religiously Muslim, Sunni, like the president of Turkey. What difference does it make? He has not committed a crime. Just because he's affiliated with a group that the president sees as an enemy, he is now in jail. So what is shaping this behavior? It's certainly not Islam. We are in the same religion. It is not ethnicity. We are in the same ethnicity. It is a president's, thin skin. He cannot take criticism. He cannot tolerate dissident groups. It is human psychology. Right? So I think what shapes human behavior, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, realistically, what shapes human behavior is human experience and human psychology. So what shapes the Arab behavior, the behavior of the Arab majority countries, is their historical experience, their childhood programming, their human psyche. Not that they are Muslim or they are all Arabs. Those are not the dominant factors. Human psychology is the dominant factor. But in life, sometimes these differences become handy, right? It is easier to mobilize all the Saudis against the Qataris, or all the Sunnis against the Shiites, all the Hindus against Muslims, or Muslims against Hindus. It is very convenient because these are very clear divisions or distinctions. So for somebody who is intent on mobilizing a group, they will look for clear distinctions. But that is not necessarily the driving force. The driving force is greed. The driving force is insecurity. The driving force is intolerance for diversity. The dominant force, the driving force is the need to control things. Okay, those are human psychological factors, and it is not unique to the Arab world. I am partially from Bosnia, I mentioned. Look at Balkans. In that tiny little part of the land, there have been conflicts and wars all the time for centuries. There's the two villages fight with each other sometimes. So this is a human condition. It is a human problem, and in different forms and shapes, it is everywhere. I think we need to realize that there are problems and dynamics that are common to all humans, and we cannot reduce them to just religion or ethnicity or anything like that.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Aslandogan, for your brilliant presentation, and also engaging with our students on a presentation on civic engagement itself. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to address this beautiful group.